Odysseus makes it all the way home, and then he leaves. I know how that sounds. The entire story, 3,000 years old, the reason we even have the word Odyssey, the whole point of it is a man fighting the entire world, gods included, just to get back home. 10 years at war, 10 more years lost at sea. Everyone he loves, waiting on a little island called Ithaca. And in Christopher Nolan's version, the one that just melted every IMAX screen on the planet, he does it. He makes it home, he wins, and then he gives it all back. He and Penelope get on a boat and sail west, into the unknown, and leave the crown of Ithaca to their son, and Homer. The blind poet who wrote this thing before Rome was even a village. Homer is somewhere rolling in his grave hard enough to power a small city. Because in the book, this is the happiest ending in all of literature. He comes home, and he stays. Nolan hands him that homecoming, and then rips it right back out of his hands. And honestly, that's just one of the changes. Nolan cut the single most famous scene in the book. He deleted an entire character you have definitely heard of. He erased the gods almost completely. He took the most iconic trick in the history of storytelling, a trick so good we still use it today, and he just left it out. So today we're doing the whole thing. Book versus movie. Every change, every cut, every invention, everything he nailed, and everything he butchered. From the horse on the beach to that gut punch of an ending. And yes, we are going to talk about Achilles and Troy. Because I already know what you're thinking, and I promise you, you're thinking something that is also wrong. Grab something to drink. This is going to be a long one. Okay, real quick so you know what you're in for. I read the whole thing. Not the summary, the actual Homer, all 24 books of it, the good translation and the boring one. Then I watched Nolan's film and took, no exaggeration, 9 pages of notes in the dark like a lunatic, while the guy next to me ate his popcorn in genuine fear of me. And look, I get why people lost their minds over this movie. This might be the most hyped adaptation of the decade. People were buying tickets to the 70mm IMAX screenings almost a full year before release. A year. There were fans online saying they were studying for the Odyssey like there's an exam tomorrow because, it's Nolan, and God forbid you miss one whispered line of dialogue under a wall of sound. And the cast is absolutely stacked. Matt Damon is Odysseus, Anne Hathaway is Penelope, Tom Holland is his son, Zendaya is the goddess Athena, Robert Pattinson, Charlize Theron, Lupita Nyong'o, Samantha Morton, It's a Murderer's Row. We'll meet all of them as they show up. Oh, and Travis Scott is in this movie. Yeah, we're absolutely getting to that. Be patient. So this is not a lazy top 10 differences list some intern wrote in 40 minutes. This is the complete comparison, scene by scene, in order, start to finish. Here's how it works. For every stop on the journey, I'll tell you 3 things. What the movie showed you, what the book actually says, and then the fun part. Whether Nolan was being faithful, being clever, or just straight up making things up. And he makes up a lot. Some of it is genuinely brilliant. Some of it is going to make the classics majors in the comments type in all capital letters. If you love this stuff, myth, movies, the little details nobody else points out, you already know what to do with that subscribe button. I'm not going to beg, I'm just going to make the next 90 minutes worth it. Deal? Deal? Let's start where the movie starts, on a beach, with a horse. The movie opens, and, okay, credit where it's due, the horse looks incredible. This is a real machine. You can see the joinery, the craft, the obsessive engineering of a thing built by people who genuinely believed it might work. It sits half submerged in the surf, tilting with the tide, and it has been sitting there for days. Long enough that some of the Greeks hidden inside have quietly drowned in the rising water, died in the dark, in the belly of their own trick, without ever drawing a sword. That is a phenomenal image. That is Nolan doing what Nolan does. It's tense, it's grim, it's got that war costs something on every single page energy. There's just one small problem. None of it is in the book. And I don't mean the details aren't in the book. I mean the whole scene isn't in the book. Because here's the thing that trips absolutely everybody up, and it's the first big lesson of this entire video, so tattoo it on your brain. The Odyssey is not about the Trojan War. The war is already over when the poem begins. Homer doesn't open on a beach. He opens 10 years later with a depressed man crying on a rock and his teenage son back home, about to lose his entire inheritance to a house full of freeloaders. Riveting cinema, I know. You can see why Nolan moved a few things around. So, the Trojan horse. The most famous war trick ever pulled. In the actual book, it isn't shown at all. It's told. Later, as a song. A blind bard performs it at a party. He sings the story of the wooden horse, and Odysseus, who is sitting right there, incognito, has to listen to a total stranger sing about the worst and most brilliant thing he ever did. And he pulls his cloak up over his face so nobody can see him cry. Which, honestly, might be cooler than the movie version. But it's not exactly a summer blockbuster opening, is it? We open on a man at a dinner party becoming quietly emotional during the live entertainment. Smash cut to Matt Damon weeping into a napkin. Now, that bard, the singer. In Homer, he's a character named Demodocus, and in Nolan's movie, the bard is played by Travis Scott. Yeah, that Travis Scott. And when that casting got announced, the internet went completely feral. My favorite reaction, and I need you to hear this in full, was somebody online writing, and I quote, "This is just ridiculous. Travis Scott did not exist in 1200 BCE. It's like Nolan doesn't even care about historical accuracy. Incredible. No notes. That is the funniest possible objection to a 3,000-year-old myth that also features a one-eyed giant and a witch who turns men into pigs. The historical accuracy of the rapper in the movie with the sea monsters. But here's the thing that actually makes me respect it, and I did not expect to be defending this. Nolan's reasoning is genuinely smart. He said he cast a rapper as the bard because the Odyssey was never written down first. It was performed, out loud, for centuries. Passed mouth to mouth, poet to poet, improvised and remixed every single night around a fire, which, if you think about it, is basically the oldest rap battle on Earth. The bard was the rock star. So putting one of the biggest performers alive in that seat, that's not a gimmick. That's kind of the whole point of what the Odyssey even is. So the meme is funny, but Nolan wins that one. Moving on. Now, the man on the beach, the one who sells the lie. In the movie, his name is Sinon, and Nolan does something sneaky with him. In the old legends, Sinon is just a Greek soldier, a plant, a con man, left behind to feed the Trojans a story. Oh, this horse, it's a holy offering to the goddess Athena, burn it and you'll curse yourselves. Better bring it inside. The Trojans buy it. Roll credits on the city of Troy. But Nolan rewrites Sinon into something that is going to wreck you by the end of this film. In this version, Sinon is a shepherd boy from Ithaca, Odysseus' own home. A kid who got drafted into a war he never wanted, and who took the place of a richer man who paid his way out of it. Remember that. Took the place of a richer man who dodged the draft. We are coming back to that in about 70 minutes, and it is going to hit like a truck. And here's the cruelest part. Odysseus doesn't tell Sinon it's a trick. He lets the boy believe the horse really is a holy offering, because a liar can get caught, but a true believer can't. If Sinon actually thinks it's sacred, he'll swear it with his dying breath, and the Trojans will believe him. Which is exactly what happens. The kid dies for a lie he didn't even know he was telling. That is not Homer. That is Nolan inventing an entire moral bruise and then leaning on it. And it's good, genuinely. Hold that thought. Because right now, I have to deal with the elephant in the room. Or rather, the guy who isn't in the room. Somewhere in this scene, a little voice in the back of your head goes, "Hang on, where's Achilles? Wasn't he in the horse? He was in the horse in Troy. Brad Pitt, the blonde hair, where is he?" Okay, sit down. Because we need to talk about Troy, the 2004 one. The one a lot of us watched at an age we probably shouldn't have, and I need you to understand something. Troy got this wrong, and not in a small way. First, the petty stuff, because it's funny. The horse in Troy looks like the props department lost the budget halfway through and finished the build out of leftover boat parts and pure vibes. Nolan's horse looks like it was designed by an actual military engineer. The Troy horse looks like a middle school woodshop project that developed ambitions. I said what I said. But the big error, the one that actually matters, is Achilles. In Troy, Achilles is alive for the fall of the city. He climbs out of the horse, he runs through the burning streets looking for the woman he loves, and he takes an arrow to the heel from Paris, and he dies right there as the city falls around him. Great movie moment. It is also not how any of this goes. Here's the real timeline, straight from the myths Homer's audience already knew by heart. Achilles dies before the horse. Before it, he's already gone. Yes, Paris kills him. Yes, it's the heel. The one spot his mother missed when she dipped him in the magic river as a baby, which is where we get the phrase Achilles' heel. But it happens during the war, in battle, not during the sack of the city. By the time somebody comes up with the horse idea, Achilles has been dead and cremated for a while. His bones are already in an urn. His armor has already been fought over. He is not climbing out of that horse. He was never going to be in it. So when you watch Nolan's film and you notice that Achilles is completely absent, no Brad Pitt figure, no blonde demigod, not even a single mention, that is not Nolan snubbing him. That's Nolan being correct. But since we're here, and since Achilles is the ghost hanging over this entire movie, let me actually tell you who he was. Because the real myth is wilder than any film has ever put on screen. Achilles was the son of a sea goddess named Thetis. And when he was born, his mother was handed a prophecy. Her son had two possible fates. He could stay home, live a long, quiet, comfortable life, grow old, and be completely forgotten. Or he could go to war at Troy, die young, and be remembered forever. Two roads. A long life nobody remembers, or a short one everybody does. And to try to cheat it, the legend goes, Thetis dipped her baby into a magical river. The river Styx, the border of the underworld itself, and it made his skin invulnerable. No blade could cut him, but she held him by the heel. And that one little patch of skin where her fingers gripped never touched the water. One spot, the only place on his entire body where he could be hurt, his heel. You have used that phrase your whole life, and Achilles' heel, your one fatal weakness, and that's where it comes from. A mother trying to protect her son and leaving behind, by accident, the exact gap that would kill him. He chose the short life. Of course he did. He went to Troy and became the most terrifying warrior the world had ever seen. And if you want that story, that's the other Homer poem, the Iliad, the war poem. But here's the thing that surprises people. The Iliad isn't really about the war either. It's about Achilles throwing a tantrum. Agamemnon insults him, takes a war prize away from him, and Achilles is so furious that he just quits, sits in his tent and refuses to fight while his own army gets slaughtered for most of the book. What finally drags him back is grief. His closest companion in the world, a man named Patroclus, puts on Achilles' armor to rally the troops in his place, and he gets killed by the Trojan prince Hector. And Achilles' grief curdles into a rage so total it frightened even his own side. He storms back onto the field, he kills Hector, and then, this is the part they leave off the lunchboxes, he ties Hector's body to the back of his chariot and drags it around the walls of the city. For days. In front of Hector's family. That's the real Achilles. Glorious, and monstrous, and heartbreakingly human, all at the same time. Now, Troy. The movie, since we're grading it. It captures the vibe, it's genuinely a fun watch, but for a myth nerd, it is a minefield. It turns Patroclus into Achilles' cousin, quietly sanding off a relationship the Greeks read very differently. It compresses a 10-year siege into what feels like about 2 weeks. It kills off Menelaus and Agamemnon during the fall of the city, but in the actual myths, Menelaus survives and sails home with Helen, and Agamemnon survives Troy only to get murdered by his own wife back home. Which, keep that in your pocket, because this very movie is about to tell you that exact story down in the underworld. And of course, the big one we already covered, Troy sticks Achilles alive inside the horse, when he'd been dead and burned for a good while by then. So if your entire mental image of the Trojan War comes from Troy, and no shame, a lot of people's does. Just know that it's a remix, not the record. And here's the beautiful irony: Nolan's Odyssey, simply by leaving Achilles out completely, is quietly more accurate to the timeline than the blockbuster that put him front and center. Achilles has no business in the Odyssey's version of the horse because he's already dead. And honestly, the Odyssey isn't his story anymore. It's the story of the other guy. The one who wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the son of a goddess. The one who won the entire war not with muscle, but with a lie so good it ended a civilization. Because the brains behind the horse, the whole idea, that was Odysseus, our guy. While Achilles was busy being the greatest warrior who ever lived, and then dying like the greatest warrior who ever lived, Odysseus was in a tent going, or hear me out, what if we just mail ourselves to them? And here's the part that makes it tragic and sets up the entire movie you're about to watch. Achilles got the easy way out. He got to die young and perfect and famous at the very top before anything could tarnish him. He's a legend. Odysseus has to live. He has to go home. And the gods are about to spend the next 10 years teaching the smartest man in the world that being clever doesn't save you from grief. It just means you're wide awake for every second of it. And it starts, the very first stop, with a monster in a cave, and a mistake that costs him everything. So the war is over, the fleet sails home, and Odysseus's ships are the last to leave. And the very first place they land is the island of the Cyclops. Now, quick note for the book readers already sharpening their knives, the movie skips a couple of stops here. In Homer, before the Cyclops, Odysseus raids a city called Ismarus and loses men. And then there's the whole island of the Lotus Eaters, people who eat a flower that makes you forget your home and your family and just stay. Nolan cuts the Lotus Eaters here. But keep that flower in your back pocket, because he does something very clever with it later. He didn't delete it, he moved it. Okay, the island. The crew lands, they see a fat sheep, and they think, jackpot, follow it, find the whole flock, grab a huge haul of food. So they follow it, right into a giant cave. And they wait inside, because that's clearly a normal and safe thing to do. The flock comes home, and behind the flock comes the owner, the Cyclops, a one-eyed giant the size of a building. And the first thing he does is roll a boulder across the cave entrance, a rock so massive the men could never move it, sealing them inside. Then he grabs 2 of Odysseus's men and eats them, alive, and goes to sleep. And here is the first genuinely interesting choice Nolan makes. The men don't attack. The giant is asleep, he's right there, but they don't kill him. Why? Because if they kill him, they're trapped. Nobody else can move that boulder. Their only way out is that monster alive opening the door in the morning, so they have to wait, in the dark, next to the thing that's eating them one by one. That, by the way, is straight out of Homer, and it's the single smartest bit of the whole episode, and I'm so glad they kept it. Morning comes, the giant rolls the rock aside just enough to let his sheep out, and the men make a break for it. Some make it, some get crushed under the giant's feet, some are still trapped inside when the door closes again. Night falls. The Cyclops comes back, eats more men, and sleeps. And now Odysseus makes his move. He takes a massive, sharpened log, and he drives it into the giant's single eye, blinds him. And the Cyclops wakes up screaming, and for the first time in the whole sequence, he speaks. He roars out a prayer to his father, begging for revenge. His father, by the way, is Poseidon, god of the sea, which, for a guy who still has to sail home across the entire ocean, is possibly the worst enemy you could make. Now the escape. In the morning, the blinded giant sits at the cave mouth and lets his sheep out one at a time, running his hands over each animal's back to make sure no man is riding out on top. And the men escape anyway, by clinging to the undersides of the animals. And here's a small change worth flagging. In the movie, they tie brush and grass onto their backs and crawl out between the sheep. In the book, they tie themselves underneath the rams hanging onto the wool of their bellies, so the giant's hands feel only sheep. Same idea, slightly different trick. Minor, fine. But now we get to the big one. The change I have been building to this whole act. Because in the movie, once they're clear, Odysseus fires an arrow to announce that they've escaped. Because this version of Odysseus has a whole personal code about always warning his prey. He even snaps his bowstring before a hunt so the animal knows death is coming. It's a cool character beat. It's also invented. And in inventing it, Nolan quietly deletes the most famous moment in the entire book. Here's what's supposed to happen. Before the blinding, in the book, the Cyclops asks Odysseus his name, and Odysseus, because he is the cleverest man in the world, says, "My name is Nobody." So later, when the blinded giant is screaming in agony and the other Cyclopes on the island come running and shout through the rock, "Who's hurting you? Who did this?" The giant bellows back, "Nobody. Nobody is hurting me. Nobody is killing me." And the other giants go, "Oh, well, if nobody's hurting you, then it's the gods, and we can't help with that. Good luck, buddy." And they leave. That's it. That's the trick. The greatest hero of the ancient world defeats a monster by naming himself Nobody, and turning the giant's own cry for help into the world's oldest dad joke. It is 3,000 years old, and it still works. Every "who's there, nobody" gag you have ever heard is a grandchild of that moment. And Nolan cut it. It's gone. No nobody. No wine to get the giant drunk first, which is also how it goes in the book. Just gone. And I go back and forth on this, I really do. On one hand, how do you cut the single most quoted scene in the book? On the other hand, and this is the theme of the whole movie, so circle it. Nolan is stripping out the fairy tale cleverness to make this feel like something that happened to real, exhausted, terrified men. Nobody is a clever trick from a bedtime story. A sharpened log through an eye in the dark is a war crime. He's choosing the war crime. Every single time, he's choosing the version that leads. But there's one more piece of the book he keeps, and it's the most important one, because it's the reason for everything that follows. As they sail away, Odysseus can't help himself. He shouts his real name back at the giant. Pride. Ego. He needs the monster to know who beat him. And that's the mistake. Because now the Cyclops can tell his father, Poseidon, exactly whose life to ruin. The smartest man in the world just doomed his entire crew because he couldn't resist taking credit. And the sea is about to stop being on his side. Back at sea, the crew figures out the bad news. That giant was Poseidon's son, and now the god of the ocean has a personal grudge. And you have to understand what that means for a man in a wooden boat 3,000 years ago. Poseidon isn't just some god, he is the sea. He's the storms, the tides, the depth under the hull, the thing every sailor prayed to before leaving the beach. Making him your personal enemy when your entire journey home is by water is like being handed a life sentence where the prison is the whole ocean. The water is no longer neutral. Every wave from here on is an enemy that wants him specifically. They land on another island, a forest this time, and they see what looks like a child, about their own size, standing in the trees. They try to talk to it. It screams. And out of the woods come enormous men in armor, and they attack. No conversation, no warning, just slaughter. The crew runs. They don't fight, they run for the ships. And these giants tear the fleet apart. Of the 3 ships, only one gets away. The others are smashed to splinters, the men killed as they scramble for the water. And the one ship that escapes is, of course, the one with Odysseus on it. These are the Laestrygonians. And this is a great example of Nolan changing the packaging but keeping the gut punch. In the book, the Laestrygonians are giant cannibals. There's no armor, no knights. A scout meets the king's enormous daughter, the alarm goes up, and the giants come to the cliffs and hurl boulders down onto the ships, and then spear the men in the water like fish and carry them off to eat. And the scale of the disaster is way bigger. In Homer, Odysseus starts this stop with 12 ships, and he loses 11 of them. 11. In one afternoon, he leaves with a single ship out of an entire fleet. The movie shrinks the numbers. 3 ships, loses 2, mostly because, by this point in the film, he simply doesn't have 12 ships anymore, and honestly because he loses 90% of his entire remaining force in 5 minutes, is a hard thing to stage without the audience losing count. But the feeling is identical. This is the moment the expedition stops being a fleet and becomes a single doomed boat of survivors. Nolan reskins the monsters as armored giants who trap the men in cages made of bent trees, which is a very Nolan, very grounded image. But the bones are Homer's. One ship left. A handful of men. A god who wants them dead, and they are almost out of food. Which is exactly why they make the next stop. And the next stop is where it gets weird. Low on supplies, they land again. Odysseus splits off to hunt a deer and sends most of the crew inland to find help. And on the way to the house, the men pass something deeply unsettling, wild predators. A lion, a panther, a big cat just sitting there, watching, not attacking, calm as house pets. Hold that image. Because those animals are a warning and nobody reads it. The men reach a little wooden house in the middle of a field, and inside is a woman. She's frightened of them at first, or she plays frightened. They reassure her they just need food. She warms up, tells them she has plenty, and gently suggests they set their weapons and armor aside and relax. And they eat, and they keep eating, and as they eat, they go slack and dreamy, like they're under a spell, and the woman moves among them, running her hands over them, and one by one, she turns them into pigs. This is Circe, played in the film by Samantha Morton, and she is one of the most famous figures in the whole poem, the witch of the island, who turns Odysseus's men into swine. Meanwhile, Odysseus, out hunting, gets suspicious. He goes to check the deer he shot, and it isn't a deer anymore, it's a man, naked, transformed, wrong. He goes back to the ship, finds the crew never returned, and heads to the house alone. And the second visit is where the movie and the book really split. In the movie, it's a tense two-hander. Circe, now not remotely scared, invites him in, offers him food, all very calm and knowing. There's a caged crow in the room that keeps screaming. She tells Odysseus to bring a hog inside to be slaughtered, one of his own men, obviously, and hands him the knife. He refuses. They circle each other, and at the peak of it, Circe grabs the knife and holds it to the throat of the screaming crow, and Odysseus lunges and grabs the bird himself, because he's realized the crow is her sister, and she can't let her sister die. Stalemate. Truce. She turns the men back, feeds them, and a deal is struck. Now that, the crow sister, the hostage standoff, the truce, that's Nolan, invented. It's not in the book at all. Here's how it really goes. In Homer, Odysseus is marching to that house to die like all the others. Except the god Hermes stops him on the path and hands him a magic herb called moly, a plant that makes him immune to Circe's magic. So when Circe waves her wand and taps him to turn him into a pig, nothing happens. He just doesn't change. And in that moment of pure witch-level confusion, he draws his sword and rushes her, and she collapses and begs for mercy, and they strike a deal that way. Through the herb and the blade. Not a bird. And here's the change that tells you everything about Nolan's whole approach. He deleted Hermes and the magic herb entirely. In fact, he deleted almost all the gods' hands-on help across the whole movie. No Hermes handing you an anti-witch plant, no divine cheat code. In Nolan's version, if Odysseus beats Circe, it has to be with his own wits and his own nerve, figuring out the sister, making the trade, not because a god slipped him a potion backstage. He keeps taking the miracles out and making the man do the work. Oh, and one more big one. In the book, after all this, Odysseus and Circe become lovers, and the crew stays on her island for an entire year. A year. In the movie, the whole Circe sequence is basically one day, and Nolan cuts the romance completely, because his Odysseus is written as a devoted husband, a total wife guy, and Nolan does not want him hopping into bed with a witch on the way home. Book Odysseus had a different policy. We'll leave it there. But before we sail on, I have to give the film its best line in this whole sequence, and it's a line that reframes the entire scene. Because when Odysseus accuses Circe of being a monster, of turning good men into pigs, she throws it right back at him. She says she isn't doing anything to them. She's not making them into anything. She's just revealing what they already are. Take away the weapons, the armor, the war, the discipline, and you find out what a man actually is underneath. And a lot of them, it turns out, are pigs. Those calm predators by the path? Those were men too. She didn't corrupt them. She uncovered them. That's not in Homer. but it might be the smartest thing anyone says in the entire movie, and it sets the table for the darkest stop of the whole journey, because Circe is the one who tells Odysseus how to get home, and her directions lead straight through the land of the dead. To get home past an angry sea god, Circe tells Odysseus, "You first have to go down to the land of the dead. Pour out a blood sacrifice, and the spirits will come, and one of them will tell you the way." So he does it. He makes the offering, the blood pools in the dark, and the dead come crawling up out of the ground to drink it and to talk. And this sequence, in both the book and the movie, is where the Odyssey stops being an adventure and becomes something closer to a horror film about guilt. The first ghost the movie gives real weight to is Sinon. Remember him? The shepherd boy from the horse, from the very start of the film. The kid Odysseus tricked into dying for a lie. His spirit rises, drinks the blood, and turns on Odysseus. He curses him. He tells him that trusting him, believing the horse was really a holy offering, was the thing that killed him. And Odysseus, cornered, admits it. He needed Sinon to truly believe, because a real believer selleth a lie better than any actor could. And the boy tells him, "I would never have broken. Even dying, I wouldn't have told them the truth. You didn't have to do that to me." And Odysseus says the coldest, saddest thing, dying men tell the truth. "I couldn't take the chance." And then he tells him, "I was there, on the other side of the wooden wall of the horse. I heard your last words." And Sinon says, "That doesn't comfort me at all." That entire exchange is invented. There is no Sinon in Homer's underworld. But it's Nolan threading his own subplot straight through the classic material, and it works, because it turns the land of the dead into the place where Odysseus has to face the specific human cost of being clever. Keep it in mind. It pays off one more time, at the very end. Then comes a ghost who is straight out of the book. Agamemnon, the great king who led the entire Greek army at Troy. He drinks, and he tells Odysseus how he died, and it's brutal. He survived 10 years of war, sailed all the way home in triumph, and his own wife murdered him the moment he walked in the door. Why? Because years earlier, to get good sailing weather for the war, Agamemnon had sacrificed their daughter, killed his own child for a favorable wind. And his wife, whose name is Clytemnestra, and who happens to be the twin sister of Helen, the woman the whole war was fought over. His wife spent the entire 10 years nursing that grief into a plan. And when he came home, she collected. And it goes deeper than the movie has time for. The daughter he sacrificed had a name, Iphigenia, and he did it at the very start of the war, luring her to the army with a lie about a wedding and killing her on an altar to buy a favorable wind. So when Clytemnestra took her revenge 20 years later from where she stood, she wasn't a villain. She was a mother collecting a debt for a murdered child, and she didn't act alone. She'd taken up with another man while her husband was away at war, and the two of them did it together. And it doesn't even stop there, because Agamemnon had a son too, who grew up and eventually came home and killed his own mother to avenge his father, and got hunted by demons for it. It's a whole cursed bloodline, generation after generation murdering each other at the dinner table. The Greeks loved this family the way we love a prestige crime drama, and Homer drops this story into the middle of the Odyssey on purpose, like a splinter under a fingernail. Because look at the parallel. A king, gone 20 years at Troy, a wife left waiting at home, a house he has to walk back into. That's Agamemnon. And it is also Odysseus, exactly. One of those two kings came home to open arms. The other came home to a knife in the dark from the person who was supposed to love him most. So every time Odysseus gets one island closer to Ithaca, this ghost is whispering the question that haunts the entire back half of the story. When you finally get home, what's actually waiting for you? Penelope, faithful at her loom? Or Clytemnestra, with a blade behind her back? He's been gone 20 years. People change. And the smartest man in the world has every reason to be afraid of his own front door. That's Homer, almost exactly. And it's not there by accident in the book or the movie. It's a warning shot. Because Agamemnon's story is the nightmare version of the exact thing Odysseus is sailing toward, a soldier coming home from Troy to a wife and a house he left behind for 20 years. One king came home to a knife. Will the other? And then comes the ghost who matters most. In the movie, he's an old man among the dead, and he asks Odysseus to send the others away so they can speak alone. This is Tiresias, the blind prophet, and he lays out the future like a map. He tells Odysseus the hard truth: your whole crew is going to die, every one of them, only you will make it home. He warns him about the dangers ahead, the whirlpool, the narrow passage where more men will be lost. And most important, he warns him about an island where the cattle of the sun god graze. Do not touch them. If a single one of those animals is killed, you are finished. And finally, even when you reach home, you won't arrive as a king. You'll have to come in disguised, as a beggar. And every word of that comes true. Exactly. That's the engine of the back half of the story. A man who has been told precisely how it ends, sailing toward it anyway, trying to cheat a prophecy he already knows he can't beat. And you might be wondering, where are the gods in all this? This is the underworld. This is myth at its most supernatural. And the answer is, Nolan keeps them almost entirely off-screen. No Mount Olympus. No council of gods arguing about Odysseus' fate, which is a huge part of the book. Only Athena, played by Zendaya, ever really appears, and even she is used sparingly. Nolan made a whole movie out of the most god-soaked story in Western literature, and he shot it almost like the gods might not be there at all, like the man is alone. Which, again, that's the entire point at his version. Alright, deep breath, because from here it's loss after loss after loss. Back at sea, they hit the sirens. Creatures whose song is so beautiful it lures sailors to smash their ships on the rocks just to get closer. The famous move here, and the movie keeps it, Odysseus plugs his men's ears so they can't hear a thing, and then has himself tied to the mast so that he, and only he, can hear the song and live to tell about it. He wants the experience, he just doesn't want to die of it. But Nolan adds something that the book very deliberately refuses to give you. In Homer, we never find out what the sirens actually sing. We know it's irresistible, we never hear the words, it's a blank the poem leaves on purpose, and Nolan fills it in. In the movie, Odysseus later admits what the sirens told him, and it's not a lie, and it's not a trap. They told him a truth he'd been hiding from himself, that some part of him doesn't actually want to go home. Sit with that, because it's devastating, and it reframes the whole journey. Every delay, every disaster. What if a piece of him was choosing it? What if the man fighting the whole world to get home is also, secretly, a little afraid of what he'll be when he gets there? That's not in Homer. That's Nolan writing a thesis statement and handing it to a monster to deliver. And quick myth nerd correction, because this one drives me genuinely up the wall. The sirens are not mermaids. I know. Every coffee logo and cartoon has told you otherwise your whole life. But in the actual Greek myths, the sirens were part bird, women's faces on birds' bodies, perched on a rocky island that was absolutely carpeted with the rotting bones of every sailor who ever steered toward the sound. They were not seductive fish women lounging in the surf. They were predators, sitting in a boneyard, singing. Nolan, wisely, keeps them vague and terrifying instead of slapping a fishtail on them. Good call. Then, the passage Tiresias warned about. A narrow channel with a monster on one side and a whirlpool on the other. In the book, these have names. Scylla, a six-headed thing on the cliffs, and Charybdis, a whirlpool that swallows the sea whole. And it's a genuinely cruel choice. Sail close to the whirlpool and you might lose everything. Or sail close to the monster and you will definitely lose 6 men, 1 for each of its heads. But the ship survives. Odysseus makes the coward's math. He picks the monster. He sacrifices 6 men to save the rest, and he doesn't warn them it's coming because if they knew, they panic and doom them all. The movie keeps the shape of this: avoid the whirlpool, lose men in the canyon. And the monster on the cliffs, Scylla, has a backstory too, because in Greek myth, everything does. She wasn't born a 6-headed horror. The story goes, she was once a beautiful nymph, until a jealous witch poisoned the water where she used to bathe and twisted her into a thing with 6 snarling heads and a ring of snapping dogs around her waist. So even the nightmare in this passage used to be a person that something terrible was done to. Circe told you that already, back with the pigs. It's the whole worldview of the poem humming underneath every monster. They were people once, and the gods are not kind. And then they reached the island Tiresias told them about specifically, the one with the cattle of the sun god. Do not touch them. And here's the trap the god set. The winds turn against them, and they're stranded on that exact island, stuck, day after day. And the food runs out, and the men are starving, actually starving, watching fat sacred cattle graze right in front of them while their own ribs show. And while Odysseus is away, they break. They kill the cattle. They don't tell him. They just eat. And that's it. That's the end of the crew. When they finally sail off, the sun god demands justice, and the ship is destroyed. In the book, Zeus himself hurls a thunderbolt and splinters it, and every single remaining man drowns. Everyone. The whole crew that cheered inside the horse, that survived the Cyclops, that walked out of a witch's house as pigs and came back as men, all of them gone over a meal they knew would kill them. And the prophecy holds, only Odysseus survives, alone, clinging to wreckage. Exactly as he was told he would be, months ago, in the dark, by a blind ghost. He couldn't save a single one of them. The smartest man in the world, and the best he could do, was outlive everyone he was responsible for. And the sea carries what's left of him to an island, where a goddess is waiting, and where he's going to lose something even bigger than his crew. He's going to lose 7 years. Odysseus washes up, wrecked and half dead, on the island of Calypso, a goddess, played in a film by Charlize Theron. She finds him, heals his wounds, feeds him. And here is where Nolan pulls off the cleverest structural trick in the whole movie, and it's that flower I told you to keep in your back pocket, way back at the Cyclops. Remember the Lotus Eaters? The island Homer has early on, where men eat a flower that makes them forget home and family and just want to stay forever? Nolan cut it from its original spot, and he moved it here. In the movie, Calypso feeds Odysseus the lotus, and under that flower he forgets. He forgets Ithaca, forgets Penelope, forgets his son, and he stays for 7 years. 7 years, just the two of them on that island. And here's the ache of it, even drugged, even forgetting, he never returns her love. Calypso wants him to stay, to love her, to be happy. And instead, every day, some part of him quietly collects the broken pieces of his ship and builds a raft, without even knowing why. His hands remember what his mind's been made to forget. He doesn't know he wants to leave. He just keeps building the thing that would let him. And eventually, Calypso does something genuinely tragic. She stops feeding him the flower. She lets him remember. And of course, the second he remembers, he's destroyed. The wife, the son, the home, all of it comes flooding back, and the piece is over. She loved him enough to give him back the pain that takes him away from her. Now, in the book, this is a little different, and it's worth knowing. There's no lotus. Homer's Calypso just holds him there for 7 years, offering him immortality, offering to make him a god who never ages and never dies if he'll only stay. And he says no. He sits on the beach and weeps and stares at the sea and chooses a mortal life with an aging wife over eternity with a goddess. And it's the gods, up on Olympus, who finally order her to let him go. They send Hermes down with a command. Nolan, once again, cuts the gods' involvement and makes it Calypso's own choice, and swaps immortality for the lotus. Same prison, different lock. She tells him how to leave, and it's brutal and beautiful. Give yourself to the sea, stop fighting it. Lie down on the raft and let the water take you, and accept Poseidon's punishment. Because the one thing even an angry sea god can't do is defy the king of the gods, and Zeus won't allow you to die. So he does. He lays down on a raft made of his own wreckage and he lets go. And here's the biggest cut of the entire movie, and most casual viewers won't even notice it's missing. In the movie, he goes into the water and wakes up home, on the shores of Ithaca, just like that. In the book, there's an entire additional kingdom in between, a place called Sharia, home of a people called the Phaeacians. Odysseus washes up there, half drowned and naked, and a princess finds him, and her parents, the king and queen, take him in. And it's actually at their dinner table, safe, fed among kind strangers, that Odysseus tells the whole story of his journey. The Cyclops, Circe, the underworld, all of it. Almost the entire adventure in the book is Odysseus narrating it out loud as a guest at this dinner party. That whole framing device, the whole "our hero recounts his travels" structure, is one of the most influential storytelling techniques in history, and Nolan just scoops it out, cuts the Phaeacians completely. Because a 3-hour movie does not have time for our hero to survive a shipwreck and then immediately attend a very nice dinner party. Fair. But it's a huge, huge piece of the book, and now you know it's gone. So, he's home. 20 years gone, his crew all dead, a god still hunting him, and a house full of strangers eating his food and trying to marry his wife. The journey is over. The reckoning is about to begin. Odysseus is finally home, and here's the twist that the prophet promised. He can't just walk in and announce himself. He'd be one man against a mob. So, exactly as Tiresias foretold, he comes home disguised as a beggar. Nobody's supposed to know the king is back. The first person he goes to is an old blind man who used to know him. His loyal swineherd, a character named Eumaeus, played by John Leguizamo. And Odysseus tests him. He doesn't reveal himself. He pretends to be a battered old veteran of the Trojan War who once served under Odysseus, and he watches how this old servant talks about his long-lost king. And the man passes the test. He's still loyal, still grieving, still hoping. And the beggar tells him something to plant a seed. Odysseus is alive. He's coming. Quick book note. In Homer, Eumaeus the swineherd isn't blind. Nolan made him blind, which is a lovely touch because it means the one man whose loyalty is purest is also the one man who can't be fooled by the disguise for the usual reasons. He knows people by who they are, not what they look like. Also, in the book, it's the goddess Athena who magically disguises Odysseus as a beggar. In the movie, with the gods pulled back, it's much more of a plain human disguise. Same beat, less magic. You're seeing the pattern by now. Meanwhile, the son. Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, has been out in the world looking for news of his father. He travels to the home of a king who fought at Troy and who is married to Helen. Yes, that Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships, here played by Lupita Nyong'o, and the movie gives her a scar across her face, a woman marked by the war that was fought over her. They tell the boy stories about his father, but only up to the end of the war. After that, nobody knows. After Troy, Odysseus simply vanished from history. And back home, it's getting dangerous. The house is full of suitors. Dozens of arrogant men who have moved into Odysseus's palace, eating his food, drinking his wine, pressuring his wife Penelope to just accept that her husband is dead and marry one of them already. And the ringleader is a slick, cruel piece of work named Antinous, played by Robert Pattinson, who described the guy as basically a sleazy gangster. He runs the house like he already owns it. He torments the servants, he mocks the old swineherd, and he wants Telemachus dead because the boy is the only real obstacle left. And Antinous has eyes and ears inside the palace. One of Penelope's own servants, a maid named Melantho, is sleeping with him. It's a real romantic relationship in the film. He kisses her, he keeps her close, and the whole time she's feeding him everything, while Penelope is really thinking what she's planning, who she trusts, her own maid quietly betraying her to the enemy. And here's the thing, that's not invented. Homer has Melantho too, a disloyal servant who shares a suitor's bed and sneers at the disguised Odysseus. Nolan just pulled her forward and handed her the keys to the plot. And this is a good moment to explain something the movie leans on hard. You'll hear the phrase Zeus's law over and over. It's worth knowing what it actually means, because it's the invisible rulebook the entire Odyssey runs on. In the ancient world, the highest sacred law was hospitality. The Greeks called it xenia. A host must shelter and feed a stranger, a guest must never abuse a host. And the god who personally enforced that law was Zeus. Break it, and you have offended the king of the gods himself. Now look at the whole story through that lens. The suitors are doomed because they've spent years abusing a host's home, his food, his wine, his wife. The Cyclops is a monster because he does the exact opposite of hospitality. He eats his guests. Again and again, the ones who break Zeus's law get destroyed. Nolan takes the gods off the screen, but he keeps their rulebook and makes it the reason the suitors have to die. In fact, the suitors send men to ambush and kill Telemachus. and the disguised Odysseus gets there in time to save his own son and reveals himself just to him, and gives him the same message, "I'm alive. Tell your mother when the moment is right that I'm here, that I'll come when she needs me most." And now, Penelope, Anne Hathaway. And I need to give the real Penelope her due, because she is not a passive prize sitting in a tower. She is, in her own way, as clever as her husband. For years she's been holding off this mob of suitors with a trick of her own. She told them she'll choose a new husband as soon as she finishes weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus's father. Noble. Reasonable. So she weaves it all day, and every single night, in secret, she unravels everything she wove. A shroud that can never be finished, for a decision that never has to come. She outpatienced an entire house of men for years with a loom and a lie. That's straight from the book, and it's one of the great power moves in all of literature. And Nolan does something interesting with her and Telemachus. In the book, it's often the son who scolds the mother, telling her to know her place. Nolan flips it. His Penelope is fierce, sharper than her son, openly telling Telemachus to grow up, even saying that if it were up to her she'd watch these suitors burn. He gave her teeth. And honestly, good. And then Penelope makes her move, a contest to finally end the stalemate. Whoever can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot a single arrow clean through a line of axe heads wins her hand. It sounds like a fair contest. It is not, because it was Odysseus's signature feat. That bow was so stiff that no ordinary man could even bend it enough to string it, let alone make the shot. She's not holding a contest. She's holding the door for a ghost. She knows, or hopes, that the only man who could ever win it is the one man who's supposedly dead. And one by one, the suitors try. And one by one, they fail. They can't even string the thing. And then the beggar, the ragged old stranger nobody's looking twice at, asks for a turn. And they laugh at him, and he picks up the bow and strings it like it's nothing. One arrow, straight through every axe head. And in the silence after, the beggar stands up and stops being a beggar. And then it's a massacre. Odysseus starts killing, and the suitors scramble for the weapons that are normally stored in the hall. But here, the film pays off the loyal blind swineherd. In the chaos, one of the suitors' men gets up to the storeroom to grab the weapons, and the old blind man locks him in, traps him, and then breaks open the floor and starts dropping weapons down to Odysseus and his son through the hole. And Telemachus fights his way up top and takes down the man in the armory while his father clears the hall below. And the men who were so brave when they were eating another man's food and threatening his wife, they start dropping to their knees, begging, trying to surrender. And this is where Nolan lands the plane on his very first invention. Remember Sinon, the shepherd boy from The Horse, the kid who took a rich man's place in the draft and died for a lie? Remember the rich man who paid his way out of the war? That man is Antinous, Robert Pattinson's character, the lead suitor. The whole time, the sleazy man running this house has been the coward who sent a boy to die in his place so he could stay home and, 20 years later, try to steal another man's wife. And Odysseus kills him. And as he does, he returns a small object to him, a little metal token, because it was the thing Sinon had asked, from beyond the grave, to be given back to the man who took his life from him. Odysseus hands it over and calls it what it is. He's returning his shame. That entire thread, Sinon, the draft, the coward, the token, the debt collected in the last act, is invented for the film. It is not in Homer. And it is genuinely, structurally beautiful screenwriting. It takes a throwaway trickster from the opening scene and turns him into the moral spine of the whole movie. Whatever you think of Nolan's cuts, and we've cataloged a lot of them, that is a writer at the absolute top of his craft. But even here, Nolan leaves things out. In the book, there's the old dog, Argos, Odysseus's hunting dog, now ancient and neglected, who's the very first one to recognize his master under the disguise, wags his tail one last time, and dies. Grown adults have wept at that dog for 3,000 years. It's gone. There's the old nurse who recognizes Odysseus by a scar on his leg while washing his feet, also cut. And the way Penelope finally confirms, it's really him. In the book, she tests him, tricks him into revealing a secret only the real Odysseus could know. about how their marriage bed was carved from a living tree rooted in the ground and could never be moved. It's the perfect final proof she outclevers the cleverest man alive one last time. In the movie, it's simpler. He shows her a keepsake he carried the whole way, an icon of home. Lovely, but it's not the bed. And the bed is one of the best scenes in the book. So the suitors are dead. The house is reclaimed. 20 years, and he's finally home with his wife and his son and his kingdom. And that's where Homer ends it, happily, restored. That is not where Nolan ends it. Here's how the poem finishes. In Homer, the families of the dead suitors come for revenge, and it almost tips into another war, until the goddess Athena steps down and forces a peace. And Odysseus is restored, fully. He's king again. He reunites with his aging father, Laertes, out in the orchard. Order is back. The right man is on the throne. The long nightmare is over and the story exhales. Nolan looked at that ending and threw it out. In the movie, Odysseus does not settle back onto his throne. He hands it over. Telemachus, Tom Holland, becomes the king of Ithaca in his place. And Odysseus, the man who spent 10 years and lost every single crewman he had clawing his way back to this exact spot, gets on a boat and leaves it all again. He and Penelope, with a handful of crew, sail west. Into the unknown, toward the setting sun, off to bury the war dead who were never given honor, keeping a promise made long ago. And Laertes, his father. That whole reunion, one of the tenderest scenes in the book. Nolan cuts the father entirely. He's not in the film. So why? Why take the one story in human history that is famous, that is synonymous, with finally coming home, and end it with the hero leaving again? Here's my read, and here's where all those little changes across the whole movie suddenly click together. Think about everything Nolan quietly did. He pulled out the gods, so the man is alone. He cut the magic, no anti-witch herb, no goddess disguising him. So every victory costs him something real. He gave the sirens that devastating line, that some part of Odysseus doesn't truly want to go home. And he invented Sinon, so that Odysseus arrives home already carrying a debt of guilt he can never actually repay. Add all of that up, and Nolan's Odysseus isn't a hero who wins. He's a man who's been so changed, so hollowed out by 20 years of war and loss and lying and burying his friends, that home isn't a place he can live in anymore. He can save it. He can hand it, clean, to his son. But he can't stay in it. The war took the part of him that could. That's the tragedy Nolan was building the entire time. Not will he make it home, but will there be anything left of the man by the time he does? You can hate that ending. A lot of people do. The book's ending is right there, and it's satisfying, and no one deliberately walked past it. But you cannot say it's random. Every single change we talked about tonight, the drowning horse, the deleted nobody, the missing gods, the invented boy, every one of them is a brick in the road to that final image of a man who fought the whole world to get home, and then couldn't bring himself to stay in it. It's not unfaithful by accident. It's unfaithful on purpose, to say something Homer never did. Whether he had the right to, that's what the comments are for. Okay, before I give you my final verdict, let's have a little fun. I'm going to rank Nolan's biggest changes. Not by how good they are, but by how hard they will make a classics professor slam their laptop shut. A countdown of blasphemy. From mild grumble to throwing the book across the room. Number 8, shrinking the giant cannibals down to 2 ships lost instead of 11. Minor, nobody's writing a furious essay about the ship count. Moving on. Number 7, turning those cannibals into armored knights instead of boulder-throwing giants. It's a reskin. It looks cool. The purist will sigh and let it go. Number 6, cutting the year with Circe down to a single day and deleting the romance. This one starts to sting, because Odysseus spends an entire year living with a witch. Tells you something real and a little unflattering about the guy, and Nolan's devoted husband rewrite quietly edits his personality. Number 5, swapping Penelope's spinal test. In the book, she catches him with the secret of the unmovable marriage bed, the perfect ending where she outthinks the smartest man alive. The movie gives us a keepsake instead. Losing that scene genuinely hurts. Number 4. Erasing the gods. No Olympus, no Hermes and his magic herb, barely any Athena. For a poem where the gods are practically main characters, meddling on every single page, this is enormous. It is the most deliberate choice in the whole adaptation. Number 3. Deleting the entire kingdom of the Phaeacians, and with it, the whole framing device. The fact that most of the adventure is Odysseus telling his own story at a dinner party. That's not just a cutscene. That's cutting one of the most influential storytelling structures in human history. Big swing. Number 2. Deleting nobody. The wine, the trick, the greatest one-liner in the history of one-liners gone. If you polled 1,000 people who read this in school, that is the single scene they'd remember. And it's not in the movie. Everybody take a deep cleansing breath. And number 1. The change that will keep comment sections brawling for the next decade, the ending. Homer gives you the homecoming, the restoration. The king back on his throne, reunited with his wife and his old father, order restored to the world. And Nolan looks at literature's most famous happy ending and sends his hero sailing right back out into the sunset instead, handing the crown to his son and leaving Ithaca behind. That is not a tweak, that is rewriting the meaning of the word Odyssey. A journey that, for 3,000 years, has meant the long road home, and Nolan ends it by deciding the man can't actually live there anymore. Number 1 with a bullet. Frame it, hang it, riot about it in the replies. So, book versus movie, let's total it up. What did Nolan get right? More than the angry purists will admit. The Cyclops trap, the witch and the pigs, the blood and the prophecy in the underworld, Agamemnon's warning, the cattle that doomed the crew, Penelope and her endless weaving, the bow, the axes, the beggar, the slaughter. The bones of the Odyssey are all here, and they're staged with more weight and dread than any version we've ever gotten. What did he change or cut? Also a lot. He deleted nobody. The most famous line in the book. He cut Hermes and the magic and most of the gods. He erased the entire Phaeacian kingdom and the whole framing device. He lost the dog, the scar, the marriage bed, and Odysseus's own father. He merged the Lotus Eaters into Calypso. And he rewrote the ending from a homecoming into an exile. And what did he invent? The drowning horse, Circe's captive sister, the siren's terrible confession, and Sinon, the boy whose whole tragic arc is nowhere in Homer and who might be the best thing in the movie. My honest verdict? This isn't a betrayal of Homer. It's an argument with him. Nolan read the oldest adventure story in the world, and instead of just filming it, he asked one quiet, brutal question the poem never really answers. What does 20 years of all this actually do to a person? And then he built a whole movie around his answer. You're allowed to disagree with the answer. I'm not fully sure I agree with it myself, but it's a real one made by someone who clearly loved the source enough to fight with it. And hey, whatever your take, the internet already had its own Odyssey. People bought 70mm IMAX tickets almost a year in advance and then treated the release like a final exam they had to cram for. There were memes about needing a study guide just to follow a Nolan movie. And of course, our friend Travis Scott, who did not exist in 1200 BCE, which remains the single funniest complaint ever aimed at a story about a man blinding a giant. There was even a whole controversy about the armor, people online insisting it looked wrong, too plain, not shiny, and Hollywood enough, and Nolan basically going, yeah, because that's what Bronze Age armor actually looked like, I did the homework, which might be the most Christopher Nolan sentence ever spoken. Some folks even joked about watching this 3-hour 70mm epic on their phone, just the way Nolan intended, which, please, I'm begging you, do not do that to the man. He will find you. So that's the whole thing. Every change, every cut, every invention. If you made it to the end of this with me, genuinely, thank you. That's rare, and I don't take it for granted. Tell me in the comments, the ending, betrayal, or masterpiece. Should Odysseus have stayed? Did cutting nobody break the movie, or did you not even miss it? I read all of them. If you learned something, or you just enjoyed the ride, the subscribe button is right there. I've got the whole rest of Greek myth lined up, and trust me, it only gets stranger from here. Until then, May the winds actually be on your side. Unlike his,